The Taklamakan is the biggest desert in China.
It's this constant battle between water and sand, life and death. People here are constantly fighting against the desert, trying to preserve area that they live on.
In 1980, a respected Chinese scientist walked away from his expedition camp in a stretch of desert so remote that even modern GPS struggles out there. And he was never seen again. That's stop number 5 on this list. Today, we're counting down 18 real places across China where solo travelers have vanished, gotten badly hurt, or simply made a decision they couldn't take back. From jungle-swallowed ghost towns to mountain passes that swallow whole expeditions. Let's start at number 18. Ghost legends locals won't discuss after dark. Number 18 takes us to Fengdu Ghost City, perched on a hillside above the Yangtze River in Chongqing Municipality. For more than 2,000 years, this complex has been known in Chinese folklore as a gateway to the underworld, a place where the dead are said to stop before judgment. Statues of demons, judges, and tortured souls line the walkways, and the entire layout was deliberately designed to feel like a descent into the afterlife. Local guides still tell the same story to anyone who'll listen. Visitors who wander off the marked path, particularly near closing time when the crowds thin out and the light starts to change, describe the same unsettling feeling of being watched by something other than the statues. During the day, with a group, it's an eerie but manageable cultural stop. Alone in a complex this large and maze-like, built into terraced hillsides with no English signage in many sections, a wrong turn at dusk can leave a solo visitor genuinely isolated with no staff in sight and no easy way back to the entrance. Number 17 is Hutuan, an abandoned fishing village on Shengshan Island off the coast of Shanghai. Once home to more than 2,000 residents, the village emptied out almost completely once the local fishing economy collapsed and younger generations moved to the mainland for work. What's left behind is one of the most visually striking ruins on the planet, with entire buildings consumed by ivy, windows turned into green portals, and rooftops slowly collapsing under decades of vegetation. It's become a magnet for photographers and urban explorers, and it's also a genuine hazard. The structures are no longer sound, floors give way without warning, and the overgrowth hides drop-offs and open stairwells that aren't visible until you're standing right on top of them. There's no cell signal across large parts of the village and no emergency services nearby, and the only route out is the same narrow path you came in on, threading between buildings that could come down at any moment. Local fishermen who occasionally pass through have found solo visitors who fell and had no way to call for help. Both stops share something in common, a stillness that photographs beautifully and conceals real danger for anyone exploring them without a second pair of eyes close by. If either site is on your list, the fix is simple. Stick to posted visiting hours, keep a charged phone with offline maps downloaded ahead of time, and let someone outside the trip know roughly when you expect to be back at your hotel. It's a small habit that costs nothing and changes everything if a path you didn't plan to take turns out to be the only way back. Trails where solo hikers don't come back. Number 16 is Tiger Leaping Gorge in Yunnan province, one of the deepest river canyons on Earth. The trekking route along the gorge is famous for sweeping views of the Jinsha River carving through the Himalayan foothills, drawing thousands of hikers every year. What doesn't always make it into the postcard photos is the trail itself. Narrow, exposed, and cut directly into the cliff face, with drops of over 1,000 feet in places and entire stretches of the high trail that have no guardrail at all. Landslides and rockfalls happen with little warning, especially after rain, and the route has a long, documented history of hikers who went missing or fell and weren't located for days. Guesthouse owners along the trail tell the same story year after year. A solo traveler checks in, heads out for what should be a few hours, and simply doesn't come back. Without a partner to notice you're overdue or call for help, a twisted ankle in the wrong spot can quietly turn into a multi-day search. Number 15 is Yading Nature Reserve, tucked into the Sichuan Mountains near the edge of the Tibetan Plateau. The reserve is genuinely breathtaking, with turquoise lakes, snow-capped sacred peaks, and meadows that look almost unreal in photos. It also sits above 13,000 feet, where altitude sickness can hit fast and hard, even for travelers who felt perfectly fine on arrival. Temperatures swing dramatically between day and night, weather changes with little warning, and large stretches of the reserve have no cell coverage whatsoever. Rescue access is genuinely limited by the terrain, and a medical evacuation from the more remote trails can take hours even under good conditions. A solo hiker who develops altitude sickness alone faces a dangerous combination, a condition that clouds judgment in a location where nobody is tracking their progress, with weather that can turn before help ever arrives. Park staff actively encourage registered group travel for exactly this reason. At this elevation, having someone who can spot the warning signs in you before you spot them yourself isn't a luxury. It's often the entire difference between a long walk back down and a real emergency. Both of these trails are open, legal, and genuinely worth seeing. The difference between a great story and a search and rescue story usually comes down to who you told before you left, and whether anyone was checking on you while you were out there. Fog and caves that swallow tourists whole. Number 14 is Tianzi Mountain, part of the Wulingyuan Scenic Area in Hunan Province, the dramatic sandstone pillars that inspired the floating mountains in a famous Hollywood blockbuster. The peaks are genuinely otherworldly, but the area is just as well known for fog that rolls in fast enough to cut visibility to a few feet, even on a trail that was perfectly clear minutes earlier. The walkways here are elevated, narrow, and run directly along cliff edges hundreds of feet up. When the fog rolls in, hikers have described losing their orientation entirely, unable to tell which direction the marked path even continues. With a group, someone usually has a saved map or simply remembers which way they came from. Alone, in zero visibility, on a path with a drop on one side, that disorientation stops being an inconvenience and becomes the entire danger. Number 13 takes us underground into the karst cave systems around Shibing in Guizhou province. This part of China sits on some of the most extensive limestone cave networks on Earth, and many of them remain only partially mapped, with passages locals have explored for generations that never made it onto any official tourist map. Independent cavers are drawn to the region precisely because it still has unexplored sections, but that's also exactly what makes it risky. Older passages have unstable ceilings, darkness disguises sudden drops, and the rainy season brings flash flooding that can fill lower chambers within minutes. Cell signal disappears the moment you're underground, and rescue teams have noted that solo cavers who get into trouble in unmapped sections are extremely difficult to locate, simply because nobody else knows which passage they took. Both of these stops reward exactly the kind of curiosity that draws solo travelers to begin with, and punish it just as fast the moment there's no one else there to say, maybe we shouldn't go any further. That's really the pattern worth remembering anywhere. Visibility can disappear in an instant, whether it's fog on a ridgeline or darkness underground. The danger isn't the unfamiliar terrain itself. It's losing track of which direction you came from with no one else there to remember it for you. Border zones, where one wrong turn means detention. Number 12 shifts away from natural danger and into a different kind of risk entirely. The heavily monitored checkpoints scattered across China's western border regions in Xinjiang. This area sits at the crossroads of several international borders, and the security infrastructure here is dense. Frequent checkpoints, document checks, and surveillance considerably more intensive than almost anywhere else a tourist might travel in the country. Foreign travelers moving through this region alone, without a guide or a group itinerary that local authorities can verify in advance, have reported extended document checks, confiscated devices, and, in some cases, hours of detainment, while officials worked through paperwork that a registered tour group would have had cleared ahead of time. None of this is random. It's simply the nature of a tightly controlled border region. But it does mean a solo traveler without local language skills, a clear paper trail, or someone who can vouch for their itinerary is in a fundamentally different position than someone traveling with an organized, registered group. Number 11 is the restricted zones of the Tibetan Plateau, an area that requires special permits for any foreign visitor, solo or otherwise. The catch is that the permitting process itself is largely built around group travel. Many permits are issued only to travelers accompanied by a licensed guide, and certain areas remain closed to independent travelers altogether. Solo travelers who try to work around this, or who wander past permit boundaries while exploring on their own, risk having their documents flagged, getting turned back at checkpoints they didn't know existed, or losing hours of their trip to an unexpected inspection. Beyond the bureaucratic risk, the plateau itself sits above 14,000 feet across much of this zone, carrying the same altitude and isolation dangers found elsewhere on this list, except here, a traveler dealing with a permit problem is also dealing with a body still struggling to adjust to the elevation, often hours from the nearest checkpoint that could actually help. The lesson from both of these stops is the same. In a tightly regulated border region, a group isn't just safer, it's often the only way the system is even designed to let you travel. Booking through a licensed agency that handles the permit paperwork in advance isn't just a convenience here, it's effectively the entry ticket. Showing up solo and hoping to sort it out at the checkpoint is the one approach almost guaranteed to cost you time, money, or your travel documents. City, blocks and train stations built for easy targets. Number 10 is a maze of alleyways in Chongqing's older districts, the kind of dense, multi-level urban sprawl that makes this city famous for footage of overpasses stacked on top of overpasses. Some of the older neighborhoods near the riverfront have narrow, poorly lit passages that wind unpredictably between buildings, and local police have flagged certain blocks for a noticeably higher concentration of petty theft and pickpocketing aimed at tourists who clearly don't know where they're going. A group of travelers checking a map together reads as confident and aware. A solo traveler, visibly lost, phone out, scanning street signs, reads as exactly the kind of target pickpockets and scam artists are trained to spot from a block away. The layout works against you too. The alleys are genuinely disorienting, with staircases that lead to dead ends and passages that loop back on themselves, meaning even a confident solo traveler can lose their bearings fast in a part of the city with very little tourist infrastructure to fall back on. Number 9 is a pattern that repeats at major train stations across the entire country: staged friendliness scams that specifically target travelers on their own. It usually starts with someone who seems to be a fellow tourist or an unusually helpful local, offering directions, a tea ceremony, or help finding a hostel. For a solo traveler, especially one who's tired after a long train ride and grateful for any guidance, it's an easy trap to fall into. These scams typically end with wildly inflated bills at a tea house, counterfeit currency handed back as change, or, in worse cases, being walked somewhere isolated and robbed outright. Travelers in pairs or groups are far less likely to even be approached in the first place, because the entire scam depends on isolating one person with no one to quietly check in with. Station staff and travel advisories have flagged this exact pattern for years, and the advice is consistent everywhere it shows up. If someone you don't know approaches you alone with an offer that sounds too easy, the safest move is to keep walking toward people you can see, not away from them. A second traveler at your side doesn't just add a witness, it removes the entire setup these scams depend on. Most operators simply move on to the next solo-looking target rather than work twice as hard on a pair. The same goes for the alleyways. Walking with even one other person changes how you're perceived on the street, and that perception is most of the battle. Dark history and crumbling ruins that leave visitors shaken. Number 8 is the Unit 731 historical site in Harbin, a preserved facility from one of the darkest chapters of World War II history, where Japanese forces conducted human experimentation during their occupation of northeast China. The museum and grounds are maintained as a memorial and education center, and walking through it is meant to be heavy. That's the entire point. But visitors who go through alone consistently describe a different kind of weight than those who go with someone else. The displays are graphic. The old laboratory buildings are preserved in a way that puts you directly inside the history rather than behind a pane of glass, and there's no one beside you to process it with in real time. Several solo visitors have reported needing to step outside and sit down for long stretches afterward. It's not a physical danger in the way a mountain trail is, but it's a site where having someone else there to talk to afterward isn't just nice to have, it genuinely matters for how you carry what you just saw. Number 7 takes us to the country's scattered abandoned sanatoriums and asylum ruins, structures left standing since mid-century health campaigns shuttered or relocated them decades ago. These buildings draw the same urban exploration crowd interested in places like Hutuan, but with an added layer: decades of local stories about the patients who were treated there and the conditions under which they lived. Structurally, the buildings are unstable in all the same ways any abandoned multi-decade structure is, with rotted floors, exposed rebar, and stairwells no longer safe to trust. Add in buildings often located in genuinely remote areas with no signal and no other visitors on a given day, and a solo explorer who gets hurt has no one to notice, no way to call out, and a long, dark structure to be found in eventually. Local urban exploration communities that document these sites almost always travel in pairs, specifically because of this combination of structural risk and isolation. It's one of the only entries on this list where the danger and the discomfort point in the exact same direction. Don't go through that door without someone standing outside it. Whatever you're carrying after a stop like the Unit 731 Memorial, having someone next to you on the drive back genuinely helps. And at the ruins, a second person who can call for help while you wait it out can be the entire difference if a floor gives way. Deserts and restricted zones with no rescue coming. Number 6 is the Taklamakan Desert, one of the largest sand deserts on Earth and one of the most unforgiving. Travelers familiar with the region often translate its name informally as the place you go in but don't come out of, and the desert has earned that reputation through sheer scale alone. Summer surface temperatures can climb past 140 degrees Fahrenheit. Sandstorms can reduce visibility to nothing within minutes, and the deep interior has essentially no infrastructure, no reliable water sources, and no cell coverage across vast stretches. Even organized expeditions plan for the very real possibility of a stranded vehicle. A solo traveler who underestimates the scale of this place, or who breaks down without a second vehicle or any way to call out, can end up in a situation where the nearest help is a full day away, if anyone even knows to come looking in the first place. Number 5 brings us back to this list's opening story. Lop Nur, a now-dried lakebed in that same desert region, Infamous both as the site of China's historical nuclear weapons testing program and as the location where a respected scientist disappeared without a trace in 1980 while leading a research expedition. Despite an extensive search at the time, no remains were ever found. Decades later, the area remains a place where independent travel is heavily restricted, partly because of lingering questions about radiation exposure from the historical test site, and partly because the terrain itself is simply that hostile, flat, shadeless, and disorienting in a way that makes it easy to lose your bearings even with modern GPS in hand. The combination of restricted access, environmental risk, and a documented disappearance involving an experienced, well-prepared expedition leader is exactly why this spot sits so high on this list. If a solo traveler insists on going anywhere near this region, it should only ever be as part of an officially sanctioned group. Full stop. These two stops are a useful reminder that scale itself can be the danger. There's no single cliff edge or collapsing floor to point to, just enormous, featureless distance that turns a small mistake into one nobody finds in time. Plateaus where the weather turns deadly fast. Number 4 is the remote monastery routes scattered across the high plateaus of western China. Places like the trails surrounding Mount Kailash and isolated retreat monasteries that sit thousands of feet above sea level. These routes carry deep spiritual significance and are visually stunning, drawing pilgrims and trekkers from around the world. They're also located in some of the most weather-volatile terrain on the continent. Storms here can form with very little warning. Temperatures can drop dramatically within an hour, and the trails themselves often offer no shelter for miles at a stretch. Caught in a sudden storm with no one else to share body heat with, split decision-making with, or rely on for a satellite communicator has far fewer options than someone hiking the exact same route with even one companion. Monastery staff in the region have long encouraged visitors to travel with porters or guides for precisely this reason, not as a tourism upsell, but because the terrain genuinely punishes solo decision-making once the weather turns. Number 3 is the network of high mountain passes connecting parts of the Tibetan Plateau and western Sichuan, where road and trail conditions can shift from manageable to genuinely life-threatening within a single afternoon. These passes regularly close due to snow even outside what most travelers would consider winter, and overnight temperatures at elevation can plunge well below freezing, catching underprepared travelers completely off guard. Vehicles and hikers alike have been stranded in whiteout conditions with visibility measured in feet, not miles. For a solo traveler, a stranded situation at one of these passes means no one to keep watch, no one to ration shared supplies with, and no one to make the call on whether to push forward or wait it out. Decisions that at this altitude and in this kind of cold can be the difference between a rough night and a fatal one. Local transport operators who run this route regularly say the same thing every time. Never attempt these passes without backup, whether that's a group, a guide, or at the very minimum, someone who knows exactly where you are and when to expect you back. Weather at this altitude doesn't give second chances the way it might at sea level. A storm that would mean grabbing an umbrella back home can mean a closed pass, a stranded vehicle, and a night you weren't prepared for, all within the same afternoon. Local drivers who've worked these roads for years all carry the same backup supplies for exactly this reason, and they never travel these stretches without telling someone their route first. The two places even local guides refuse to enter alone. Number 2 is Hojil, also known as Kekeksili, a vast nature reserve on the Tibetan Plateau and one of the most remote, hostile environments anywhere in the country. Average elevations here exceed 14,000 feet. Temperatures regularly drop to extremes that make exposure a serious threat even in daylight, and the reserve was established specifically to protect endangered wildlife from poaching, which means access for ordinary travelers is tightly restricted, and what infrastructure does exist is built for conservation work, not tourism. Rangers who patrol this reserve do it in teams with serious equipment, and even then, the job carries real risk. One of the reserve's most well-known patrol leaders lost his life here protecting the land decades ago, a story still told by everyone who works the area today. For an ordinary solo traveler, the danger isn't hypothetical. There's no cell service across nearly the entire reserve, no settlements for hundreds of miles in parts, and weather systems that can turn lethal with almost no warning. This is a place where solo and tourist simply aren't compatible concepts. The handful of people who do get special permission to enter go in groups, with permits, with support vehicles, and with a clear plan for exactly what happens if something goes wrong. Which brings us to number 1, the unrestored sections of the Great Wall, far from the polished, rebuilt stretches that show up in postcards. Locals call these stretches the Wild Wall, crumbling original stone, centuries old, climbing along ridgelines with vertical drops on either side. No guardrails, no signage, and in many stretches, no other visitors for hours at a time. Sections near Jiangkou have drawn hikers for years, precisely because they're raw and untouched, but that same untouched quality is exactly what makes them dangerous. Loose stone gives way without warning. The trail itself disappears in places, forcing hikers to scramble across exposed rock with nothing to grab onto. There have been well-documented cases of hikers falling, getting lost for days, or never being found at all in these stretches, and Chinese authorities have repeatedly issued warnings against entering unauthorized sections specifically because rescue access is nearly non-existent once you're more than an hour or two in. It's a fitting, almost poetic place to end this list. The literal Great Wall of China, built centuries ago to keep danger out, has sections that have quietly become some of the most dangerous places in the entire country to wander into, alone, unprepared, and unaccounted for. If there's a single takeaway from these final 2 stops, it's that the places with the least official tourism infrastructure are often the ones where solo travel feels most tempting, simply because there's no one around to tell you not to. That same absence is exactly why a group, a guide, or at minimum, a clear safety plan matters most right here. And it's exactly why these 2 stops earned the top spots on this entire list. 18 places, 18 reasons, the same advice keeps coming up again and again. Distance, isolation, and unpredictable terrain. Don't care how experienced a traveler you are. They care whether someone else knows where you are. That's really the thread connecting every single stop on this list. It's almost never about China itself being dangerous. It's about what happens when something goes wrong in a place where no one is there to notice, to help, or to call for backup. A twisted ankle on a crowded trail is an inconvenience. The exact same twisted ankle alone, miles from a signal, can become something much worse. None of this means skip these places. Some of the most breathtaking experiences in the entire country are hiding inside this exact list. Ghost cities, sacred peaks, ancient wild stretches of the Great Wall. It means go with someone, register your route, tell someone your plan and your timeline before you ever leave cell range. A few habits show up again and again across all 18 of these stops. Travel with at least one other person whenever the route allows it. Download offline maps before you lose signal, carry a portable charger, and always leave your day's plan with someone back at your hotel, even if it feels unnecessary. None of these cost much time or money, and every single one of them is the difference between a story you tell at dinner and one that ends up on the evening news. If you've stood in any of these 18 places, tell us in the comments which one you'd actually attempt and which one you'd never go near, group or not? And if this kept you on the edge of your seat, hit subscribe, because next week we're heading somewhere just as remote and twice as strange.